Okay, today I'm going to talk about the concept of narrow philosophical rationalism. And I think the meaning of the term is contained in the title. It's exactly what it says on the tin, in a sense, except for the use of the word rationalism. The word rational and rationalism is commonly abused in our culture. When we say someone is a rationalist, we mean a lot of the time all kinds of different doctrines on all kinds of different subjects, including metaphysics, epistemology, politics, just all kinds of stuff. And other than a sort of vague sternness in one's outlook, the term rationalist has, in many people's usage, been almost entirely drained of any specific meaning. So I have to add the words narrow and philosophical to clarify what is meant by rationalist. The word philosophical means that we are talking about a method of thinking. We are not saying anything about the contents of what specifically is being thought about. We're not giving any premises in narrow philosophical rationalism to exercise our rationality upon. We're only saying something about how we think, not what we think about. And by the term narrow, I mean that I am excluding any of the other possible meanings of the word rationalism or rationalist. Narrow means we're not talking about politics, we're not talking about metaphysics, we're not talking about epistemology, we're not talking about whether God exists, we're not talking about anything else except what is meant by the term rational. So in a one-sentence definition, narrow philosophical rationalism means that everything that is real and or true conforms to the fundamental laws of thought. No exceptions. Now, it's really a two-sentence definition because you have to add no exceptions on the end. And the no exceptions rule could perhaps be substituted for the first sentence. I mean, just narrow philosophical rationalism means no exceptions. Might be a self-contained definition. It means that your views have to be absolutely consistent. Or at least that's something you're aiming for. And it means that you have to put this before you get into any specific proposition. This means everything has to conform to the fundamental laws of thought, especially God, if there is a God. So narrow philosophical rationalism does not include many of the irrational forms of theism and supernaturalism. Those are excluded by the term narrow philosophical rationalism. In my opinion, Calvinism is excluded by narrow philosophical rationalism. But if there are any Calvinists out there who can try to somehow reassert that the term rational Calvinist is not a contradiction in terms, I think it is. But any Calvinists out there who can try to reestablish that, maybe they could prove me wrong. But the thing is, no exceptions to the fundamental laws of thought. None. Not on theological grounds, not on moral grounds, not on political grounds, Not on any ground. And especially not on emotional grounds. And this, of course, also applies for, atheistic systems. Atheists can be narrow philosophical rationalists. Atheists can be narrow philosophical rationalists. Naturalists can be narrow philosophical rationalists. Supernaturalists of a certain variety can be narrow philosophical rationalists. Only if they admit the supernatural has no more power than anything else to contradict or work around or be somehow outside the fundamental laws of thought. Because the fundamental laws of thought, being the law of non-contradiction, the law of identity, and the law of the excluded middle, have no exception anywhere. That is what is meant by the term. Now, the reason the term is useful is because if we are going to get into a debate or a discourse over other topics like whether God exists, whether it is possible that there can be a supernatural, we have to have some kind of common value in order to have such a discussion and it to be in any way meaningful or productive. Every discussion has to start with some kind of common ground. I'm going to talk about how this applies in the theological realm and how I only accept classical apologetic type arguments and absolutely reject presuppositional apologetic type arguments, because you have to start from common ground, and that's what classical apologetics means. It means starting from common ground. Nothing can be outside the fundamental laws of thought. I hope I can't emphasize that too strongly. And a lot of people say, well, so that denies God's power. You know what? Saying that God can violate the fundamental laws of thought denies God's power. It denies the reality of God's power, because we already know you can't violate the fundamental laws of thought. If something violates the fundamental laws of thought, it cannot be real or true. It's also important to distinguish between the idea of logic and the idea of science. We are not talking about things like the law of gravity or the relationship between matter and energy, or, we're not talking about any other laws. We're only talking about the fundamental laws of thought. It's possible for someone to be a materialist and believe in narrow philosophical rationalism, and it's also possible for someone to be a spiritualist, someone who denies the real objective existence of physical things and be a narrow philosophical rationalist, because narrow philosophical rationalism is about propositions and nothing else. So what this gives us is a common ground in which we can have a rational discussion. If someone cannot accept this premise, there is no point in having any kind of debate or discussion with them on any subject at all. Okay, I think I've just about emphasized that just about enough for today. Probably in print at some point I'm probably going to give perhaps a little bit deeper and more detailed exposition on it. That's probably it for today. Okay.